all, and welcome back to That 1 Inch Barrier, a monthly podcast in which myself, Josh, Barry, Kieran Griffiths, hello boys, how are we? Good. Where we all watch a film, an international cinema film, to hopefully open you all up to the world of foreign cinema by overcoming the 1 inch barrier. It's known as subtitles. Episode 6 now, which means, as we were just discussing, we've all had 2 picks. This is my second pick for the show, and I'm very excited to be talking about this one today. But firstly, obviously, thank you everyone for tuning in on YouTube, or if you're listening, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts. Buzzsprout calls it third-party podcast source, so wherever you're listening to on like your Huawei phone, we thank you. But the support for the show has been incredible. Obviously, our last episode, Mummy, did really well. That sort of very much resonated with a lot of people who love Xavier Dolan films. Sad to say I haven't watched another Xavier Dolan film since. We've had a couple more to watch.
I just bought 4.
Did you?
I did.
Where from? Zavi?
No,
Zavi's
Amazon.
close.
Amazon, yeah.
Amazon, okay.
Like a little 4-pack.
And it's funny because I was talking to someone about Xavier Dolan films at this wedding I was at over the past weekend. So I don't know if it's us. I don't know if this surge in popularity for Xavier Dolan.
I'm going to claim it.
I think we should. I absolutely think we should. But obviously, thank you for the support, and we're excited to dive into today's movie. So we've been pretty contemporary so far. I think the oldest movie we've watched so far would be Et Mama Tabien, if I recall correctly.
Early 2000s.
Yeah, early 2000s.
2000s.
Yeah.
So we jumped in a massive time machine for this one. We've gone to 1931 with Fritz Lang's M. So it's a film from Germany. So I don't know about you boys. This is my first and only Fritz Lang movie. I had watched it for school about 15 years ago. So, but was this Fritz Lang's first? Well, sorry, for you guys, the first Fritz Lang film?
No, I've seen Metropolis.
Metropolis.
Yeah.
Have you done
First for me. So,
Right.
I mean, Metropolis is obviously his other
Yeah.
big one.
Yeah.
Silent film from like 1927.
I think, yeah.
Which
Yes.
is probably, if you don't know him for M, you probably know him for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
yeah.
then he also did, is it The Big Heat? Which
Yes.
was one of his American
One of
films.
his- yes.
But yeah, so first interaction with him for
After
me.
after leaving Germany when he started making, which we definitely got a bit of a history lesson of German filmmaking in the 1930s going on today. So, but yeah, this was Fritz Lang's 15th movie. So Metropolis was his 13th. This was his 15th. And I guess the popularity, or maybe one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this film, is that it's pretty much commonly regarded as the blueprint for the modern psychological thriller. So even in 1931 itself, a film about someone who murders children was pretty provocative. It was,
man, yeah.
considering that, spoiler alert, you don't see any children get killed in this movie. Like we were talking earlier, it's got a PG rating, or so it's pretty like tame in regards to what you see. Thematically, it's quite intense, but yeah, it's the blueprint for the modern psychological thriller and sort of the procedural drama.
Yeah.
Sort of how we see, as an audience, we're sort of drip-fed information about the killer and then finding out what the police know about the killer and then the investigative process behind that. But funnily enough, before we sort of really break into it, I don't know if you guys felt this as well. When I was watching this, I kept getting reminded of The Hunt, the Danish film, in which my recollection of watching M years ago was, it's really about the police trying to hunt down this killer. But this movie is definitely more so about the public's reaction to a killer and what lengths they will go to when the police can't get the job done. And I really got vibes from Thomas Vinterberg's The Hunt. I don't know about if you felt that at all, but
Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of the film doesn't have a clear protagonist. We have an antagonist
Yes.
in Hans Beckett, the murderer.
the murderer, yeah.
But I don't think there's a protagonist as such. And I think if you think about who the main character is outside of him, it's almost society as a whole.
Yes,
and that's I think what Lang is really talking about. We'll come back to this. I don't want to dive too deep
Too
into
deep,
things
yeah.
straight away. But I think there's definitely some social commentary around vigilante justice and how society reacts to this and how it's impacting everyone from the public to the police to even other criminals.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I definitely get what you mean in terms of that, people taking justice into their own hands.
And that's kind of where I wanted to go with that, because when Fritz Lang actually announced he was making the film, he sort of had said, and this is probably very well exemplified in the final scene of the film, that it was a warning to neglectful mothers of the time of being like, we need to look after our children more. And whether that is obviously with everything that was sort of uprising in Germany in those years leading up to World War II and whatnot. But he definitely himself said it was a very socio-political message about neglectful parenting. But then when he also announced the film, because of its content, he was lambasted with death threats. and no studio would make this film. They're like, why would we, you know, in our beautiful, polite 1930s society, want to make a film about someone who murders children? So it was a very uphill battle for Lang to get this movie made.
I think you'd struggle to get a film like that over the line in any decade.
Totally, right?
Let alone in the 1930s.
Well, it's still provocative now, isn't it, right? Yeah.
And let alone in Germany, which, you know, we joke about this is going to be more of a history podcast than a film podcast, but, you know, 1931 in Germany, you know, that's Weimar Germany. It's Germany in its sort of, you know, infancy of democracy post-World War I.
Yes.
But what you got to remember is that the Nazi Party were only about 2 years away from taking full control of the country. You know, Hitler became chancellor in 1933. So the Nazi Party had a pretty, you know, strong grip on German culture and arts as well. So trying to get a film about that over the line then, I don't know how he did it.
Yeah.
Well, it was pretty much like a studio doing B movies, ultimately, that ended up letting him have a crack at it.
I just read that even though Metropolis is this masterpiece, it lost so much money.
Yes.
And one of his other big films, I can't remember which
just based on the scale of the production and stuff.
Lost a heap of money as well. So it actually, whoever produced that, it pretty much sent them broke.
Right.
So then the next
so I'm surprised anyone would touch him after that.
And then that's why they kind of said it was interesting that he went back to this real, like, small scale, realistic setting.
Yeah. It's quite interesting, actually, 'cause I never thought of it that way. Yeah. Like, I know, I haven't seen Metropolis, but obviously knowing of it and knowing of Lang's work, both pre and post this is a quite contained movie. It's limited use of sets, like, you know, out in, there's probably like 2 blocks of Berlin used and stuff. And then there's the ship, and then everything's kind of actually underground more so anything in these, you know, buildings and abandoned buildings and bunkers and whatnot. So it's very small scale. So,
but he considers this to be his magnum opus.
He does.
So, which is surprising because, you know, maybe a couple of years ago, before I was sort of really into this kind of stuff, I would have thought of Metropolis when I thought of Fritz Lang.
Yeah, totally,
and I think that's what most people probably think of, but this is the film he considers to be his best work, and I can totally see why.
It's funny saying that as well, because it was remade in Hollywood 20 years later in 1951, and he was very much like, why would anyone want to remake what is perfection? But then he also credited that remake to him getting more positive reviews about his film after watching the 1951 version. So he found the pros and the cons of it all. So
I think that's pretty common, though. There's a lot of older films that weren't particularly well received when they were released, and then get looked at a lot more favorably, you know, 20 or 30 years down the line.
Yes.
I think Fight Club was panned when it was released.
Big time,
It was a box office failure. And now it's regarded as one of the best films of the 1990s. It's funny how our perceptions can change with time.
And speaking of best films as well, so this currently actually holds one of the only movies to hold 100% perfect critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. 99 currently in IMDb's top 250. So it's even retrospectively now, and obviously with the internet and people, you know, watching it retrospectively, you know, it's a pretty damn good movie. Lang spent 8 days inside a mental hospital, spoke with actual child murderers, and then hired for the criminals in this film, real life criminals, of which 25 were arrested during the production.
No, I was reading that.
It's a pretty fast and loose set old Lang had going on here. So
can you imagine though a director nowadays going, I spent a week inside a mental institution talking to actual serial killers for the production of my film? I feel like that would not go down.
It'd be problematic, right?
True.
It'd be
You'd be glorifying it.
Yeah, exactly, right?
But he was talking to the Vampire of Dusseldorf, I think was the name.
Yep.
Why do they always have such cool names? If you didn't want people to become serial killers, stop giving them cool names.
There's one serial killer out there who's gone like, I just want the cool name. Like, I don't really like killing people, but I want the media to give me that cool Vampire of Dusseldorf name.
Well, that's it. You're not calling him like Danny the Diddler or something. Like, no one's going to want to be known as that.
And now that one guy called Danny Diddler's like, oh, why'd you shout me out of the podcast? And just sort of wrapping up about just a bit of history on the film. So Peter Lorre, who plays Hans Beckett, the serial killer in this film, was actually a famous comedian. And this was his first very serious role. Did it so well, apparently, that he was only typecast as villains after this film. So, and it's funny, you can kind of see the comedic acting, especially, you know, in a film where we're coming out of the silent era and we're using, you know, the talkies are now on the rise. His expressions and the way that Lorre sort of moves his face and the bulging eyes, and his eyes were such a big part of the the gross sort of feeling. Yeah. I was trying to think of a word, but it just makes you feel gross. Yeah. But even his physical mannerisms and the way he moves around the set and stuff kind of has this Charlie Chaplin-esque move to it. But then you completely change the tone of the film and the atmosphere, and it turns into something that's really unsettling. So
I think sometimes comedic actors can often make the best creepy actors. I mean, you look at Robin Williams.
Yeah, right. 1 Hour Photo.
Stuff, Insomnia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He plays a really good creep. I think Jim Carrey does a really good job when he gets to play those a bit more creepy roles. So it is funny how much of an overlap there is there between like comedy and creepy.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep the creepy chat going. So this was first time watching the film.
Yeah.
What were the initial reactions, I guess, before we really break it down? Especially with like when I told you we were doing this last episode, and I was like, it was the blueprint for the modern psychological thriller. Were there expectations going into it of this is going to be pretty damn good, and then were those expectations met? The hard-hitting questions straight off the bat, Josh, Barry.
Well, I was expecting it to be really good.
You set the bar pretty high.
Yeah, that's a fairly high bar.
I'm not going to apologize.
What was your? Because I just little off tangent, but I watched it on DVD. You had the Blu-ray.
Yes, thank you to Eureka for their amazing reproduction that I forgot to bring with me.
Yeah. How was the transfer?
It looked really good.
Yeah, okay.
The frame rate was a little strange.
Okay.
Like stuff looked a bit fast. I don't know enough about the production of old movies, but like it looked stunning. Like the film stock quality is amazing. Yeah. It was strange. Like the 30s is a really weird decade for films.
Right.
So for people who don't know a lot about film history, first film with sound was The Jazz Singer in 1927. Mm-hmm. So you've got this film that's come out 4 years after pretty much the invention of sound, if you want to call it that. Fritz Lang's first sound film. So everyone's still very much finding their feet in terms of how to use audio in movies.
Yeah.
Some films were using it just for every possible, circumstance, and some films use it sparingly, like this does.
Yeah.
There are still, long sequences in this film with no sound. There's no score.
Yeah.
No, I found that really interesting, the way he uses silence.
Yeah. But then you'll just have like a sudden burst of noise that it's sort of like that shock, it's like a jump scare with audio.
Exactly what I wrote down is that many times, and the one where I noticed it the most is when the police are scouring the streets initially, and they're pretty much like, we're going to round up anyone who has a history of violence against children. Yeah. And it's a long scene. Yeah. It's probably like a 7-odd minute scene of people just walking around. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it's the whistle.
Yeah.
And I was wearing it I was watching it with headphones, so I was watching it on Criterion. It just scared the shit out of me. Like, and it's crazy to think that how much we use sound as jump scares. When I'm watching horror, I'm very much watching for the visual. You're waiting for something to jump at the screen. So the unsettling nature and atmosphere of the movie, then when a sound jumps in, it's quite, like I said, used sparingly, but I would say used quite well. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Silence anyway.
Yeah.
It's a weird decade though, because I think you watch films from the 40s, you watch things like, immediately Casablanca and Citizen Kane come to mind, and I think they still feel very modern.
Yes.
In terms of the way that they're shot, the way they're edited, the way they're acted, they feel modern. Right. But then you go back to the 30s and it's amazing how quickly stuff starts to feel old.
Right. Yeah.
Is what I found with it. It feels like a very old movie because it is.
Yeah.
But I've wrote here that it sort of suffers from, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, Seinfeld is unfunny.
Yeah.
So, seems, so the whole thing with Seinfeld is unfunny is that people watch Seinfeld now, they think it's not funny because it's been done so many times.
Oh, yes.
But it's the blueprint.
Yes.
So you watch something like M and you go, this is so like overdone and cliched, and every other film has copied this. And then you go, oh wait, every other film has copied this.
Yeah.
Even stuff like Citizen Kane, which is, seen as so groundbreaking, you can see the influence. You can see that Orson Welles probably watched M and went, how can we do this but better?
Would you, because it's funny you say this, so we're watching this movie and absolutely there's a dated feeling to it, but I'm watching the way Lang moves the camera around certain scenes, and there's two examples that come to mind. The first one is when they're recruiting the beggars. Yes. And the way he moves to one thing and then still unbroken takes.
Well, that's like a 2.5 minute single shot, basically.
That's the one where it goes through the window.
He stitches it through the window. It's incredible.
That one, I was like, I can't believe they did this almost 100 years ago.
Right? So I'm thinking the same thing. Like when, there's still dated aspects, but the start of what we know as modern filmmaking sort of comes through here. And then the other one is There's a scene where I can't for life of me remember the context of the scene, but the inspector's on the phone. And every time he says something, the camera pushes in a little further and there's a silence and it pushes in further. And I was like, this is fantastic film because I'm finding myself as I'm watching it going in with the camera each time.
I think a lot for me. I mean, I definitely, when I watch any film this old, have to certainly remind myself of how
a grain
old
of
it
salt
is.
sort of thing.
And like, you got to really think, okay, what technology? I mean, when the film started, I was like, what did he have to go off here? Like, it's all brand new. Like, he's doing all this brand new, basically.
Totally.
Which kind of blew me away.
Do we think we give it a bit more of a pass because it's?
Well, I think it's hard to mark something like that down. For
Yeah,
me. I've definitely find old films like this hard to score because it's like.
Do you watch it through the lens of 1930s filmmaking or, you know, with the nostalgia of, you know, what?
And that's so foreign to us. I mean, like, you know, something 90 years ago, you know, not to be too morbid, but everyone who worked on that film is long dead.
Oh,
yes, yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's a whole world away from what we know.
Absolutely.
So it's really hard to rate it. Like you said, like I recently saw Wings at Goma, which was the first film to win Best Picture, 1927 silent World War I film. I had no idea what to score that.
Yeah.
Did I enjoy it? It was okay.
Yeah.
It's a 2+ hour long silent film.
Yeah.
But it's incredible what they were able to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you guys have probably seen, if you've not seen the film, the tracking shot where it goes over the top of the tables at the party scene. How do you do that in 1927?
That's right.
And there's so many moments in M where I'm going, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And you can see the influence that would go on to have, like I said, Orson Welles, but even modern directors, Hitchcock, you know, Kubrick, Spielberg,
Fincher. I got big Fincher vibes
with the camera movements.
Yeah, especially the camera
not
movements.
not showing the killer until halfway through the film. It's always from the from behind
or shadows and stuff. The use of shadows.
That
in
initial
this film.
shadow.
I mean, one of the questions we obviously ask is what is your favorite scene in the film? And it's hard for me to not say the introduction of Hans Beckett where, you know, and it's the perfect shot for me. And we're watching the little girl bounce the ball down the street. She almost gets hit by a car, so she's saved by a police officer. So we're already on edge of that sort of thing. And then we get a massive cutout being like 10,000 marks. There's, you know, these two children are gone missing, feared, dead. This massive spiel. And this little girl's just throwing her ball up against it very innocently. And then just this menacing shadow. And it's always, it doesn't matter what these creeps say. It's going to be so unsettling because he's just like, what a pretty ball you have. And I was like, oh God. I was like, what's your name? Oh, fuck. You know, it's like, it's just so well done. So it's these modern techniques that, you know, like I said, it's 90 years old, this film. And then even if that popped up, say in a Fincher film today, I'd be sitting, I was like, I'd give him the Oscar. Give Fincher the Oscar. It's incredible. You know what I mean? So it's outstanding. So
as the first film as well to use a musical motif.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I actually didn't know that.
Yeah. So obviously with Hans Beckett, one of the things that he does is when he's sort of in his real creepy mode,
oh my God,
he starts whistling in the Hall of the Mountain King,
first.
which for those who don't know is the dun 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 dun. So he whistles that, and that's the first use of like a musical cue. You know, you think about, you know, I can't think of sort of other examples off the top of my head, but like when. Oh, Jaws. Yeah, perfect example. So Jaws, the music every time the shark comes in, that's a musical motif. Yeah. But M was the first film.
I didn't know it was the first. That's incredible. And it's creepy as hell. And but it plays such a huge part then in leading into the third act of the film as well. The climax of when the blind beggar hears it and he's like, I heard this the other day when little Elise was God, this is a great fucking movie. So I guess we'll come into favorite scenes, and my favorite scene being that one, but also the one shot take through the beggars and then into where the inspectors and the criminals are trying to figure out how they're going to catch Beckett has to be some of my favorite scenes. So how about yourself, Josh? Do you have a favorite scene from M?
The tracking shot was probably the initial, like it's just the scale of that for how long ago that was. As it started and coming up and coming across, I'm like, how?
Yeah.
Like,
it's just,
it's really amazing.
That's the thing as well. It's not only is it's, you know, you would assume they're using some sort of dolly, like a, you know, on wheels, on rails, moving around because they didn't have steady cams or cranes back then. Yeah. But it's moving forward, it's moving laterally, it moves up, it goes through objects.
It's fully three-dimensional.
It's incredible. Yeah, you get a real scope of the space because that feels like, especially we're talking about sort of the smaller scale, I guess, of the production, it makes it feel grand. And that's just fantastic filmmaking as well. But it's kind of interesting before we jump into your favorite scene. I'm just thought this now, is that we're talking about this as an incredible psychological thriller, the blueprint of that. But it's the whole point of the podcast is that it's a foreign film, right? It's a German film. So it's kind of exciting to be like, everything we know about modern Hollywood filmmaking has stemmed from these German roots, you know? And a film like Wings, I guess you could even look at that and be like, so was that a British production or American production? American production.
Yeah.
So, you know, still quite revolutionary in what it does. And then, well, actually a better example would be Citizen Kane, you know, Orson Welles sitting down watching this movie, an American production that is so revolutionary that still stems from, I guess you could call these auteurs of, you know, German cinema. I'm sure French cinema, Italian cinema will probably have a huge part of that too. So I guess we owe a lot of what we love about modern filmmaking to a German director, which is kind of cool, actually. Yeah. Austrian, sorry, he's Austrian. Yeah, German production, Austrian director. Yeah. I don't want to. Yeah, sorry.
No, let's not get.
Please don't cancel me. Please. Sorry.
Born in Vienna when it was still the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
There we
to
go.
give you a sense of time.
Yeah.
He was born in a country that doesn't exist.
Anyway. Oh, how the world has changed. But back onto favorite scenes. Kieran, do you have a scene that sticks out for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, the kangaroo court. So in sort of the last 15 minutes of the film, once Beckett's been captured by the criminals, they put him on trial in their own kangaroo court with a defense counsel and a jury and a judge and everything like that.
That defense counsel's great.
He's fantastic.
Like, I'll defend you, but it's not looking good.
I'll be honest with you, mate. Your chances aren't great. But I think for me, that was the scene where this went from a very good film to a great film.
Yeah.
And if I had to really narrow it down even further, Beckett's monologue where he starts talking about how he is a monster and he acknowledges that, but he feels like there's this something trapped inside of him that makes him do all these terrible things that takes over him. He goes and murders these kids and then he sort of wakes up for himself, sees the wanted posters and goes, how could I have done that?
Yeah. And it's funny because he almost looks at crime comparatively. He goes, you choose to steal and you choose to do these things to survive. He's like, I can't stop. Like, it's funny how he's like, you will give pity to those who are committing crimes to help themselves or to help other people. Why not show that pity on me? And it's a great monologue. And was that in one take as well? I think that's just the
pretty
camera
much,
on him just
it's-
screaming.
That must be like
Horrifying.
the majority of his actual dialogue as well in the film.
I would say that's probably about 80 to 90% of his dialogue is
Just
in
that
that
whole
scene.
last scene. Yeah.
And it's phenomenal because you know that this is a guy who is a serial murderer of children, and yet the way he talks about himself and comparatively to the other criminals and society as a whole, you almost feel sorry for him. Which is incredible. I think that's a testament to Peter Lorre's performance, to the script.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's really impressive, and I think it comes back to those themes of what Lang. You know, it's very much, I think, a film about that capital punishment isn't a solution.
Right. Yeah.
I think from what I've read, you know, Lang was a big proponent of not, you know, using capital punishment for any crimes.
Yeah.
And I think that really comes across in this because they're saying that, you know, despite all these terrible things, this is a sick man who needs help.
Yeah.
You know, whereas the criminals say he's a sick man that needs to be put down.
Yes. Yeah.
But that scene really, really sold it for me. And I think especially because these aren't just sort of any old criminals. It's basically the German equivalent of like the Italian mafia.
Yeah, but ultimately, that's it. Yeah.
You know, they're like crime bosses with families and syndicates and stuff like that.
And it's kind of funny with their context and their backstory is that they're less concerned about this guy being a child murderer and more so that the police are raiding all their places. They're like, we're
everywhere.
sick of the police trying to take over. Like, they're looking for a man in the wrong places. Let's just find him first. We get a child murderer, but the police also leave us alone. Like, it's funny that you look at these ulterior, or Lang puts forward these ulterior motives for you to be like, well, their hearts might not be in the right place, but they'll get the murderer. And that's kind of where that societal sort of witch hunt comes into play.
yeah.
It's like you can understand why people, not only are they scared because there's a killer on the streets, but when someone steps forward and goes, we'll help find them, you don't care what else their sort of motive is behind it. You'll be like, okay, we side with the criminals now and we'll try and find. There's a lot of layers to this film.
Yeah,
Like,
I
it's a
don't
very-
think anyone's intentions are really pure though, because I think,
No.
as you said, the criminals want to catch the killer because they're brothels and bars.
It's just
and
it's disrupting
Yeah.
their business. Yeah.
I think when the police are in one of the underground bars and they're talking to the woman who owns it, and she's saying like the working girls can't work and the drug dealers can't deal drugs and all this stuff. You're like, you're disrupting my business.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why they want to do it. But even the police, like, it's political pressure
Yeah.
and moral panic. Like, they don't really care that children are being murdered because it's just, some kids from some poor families. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, like, the government are coming down on us that we need to find this person. Like, people are, like rioting in the streets because we haven't caught this person. Like, it's, I don't think anyone's intentions are really,
No.
we want to
Pure.
keep the children safe. And that's what Lang says very, very obviously at the end of the film.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. The last shot of, because I love the kangaroo court scene, and my favorite part of that is the reveal of when Beckett comes into the room, and it just is this sweeping shot of like at least 60 people just staring at him, and he's just like, I'm done. Like, this is the end for me. But he does get a trial at the end, and it's a very quick sort of shot to make you give the audience a sense that it's a trial, and we see the three. We assume it's the three mothers, but we know that it's Elsie's mother is the one in the center because we see her earlier in the film, and it's a shout to the audience. It's almost a fourth wall break that she's staring right in the camera and she's like, "We can't be neglectful of our children. Like, we are responsible." I think I wrote here. We just have to look out for our children better. And then when it cuts to black and goes, "All of you," it's very much a Fritz Lang.
It's
just being
talking
like,
to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the really interesting thing with the kangaroo court scene, and I will fully disclaim that this is something I read. I'm not coming up with this.
totally,
It's very good. But you have a judge in like the safecracker, the head of the criminal underworld. He's sort of the judge. You have the gallery, which is all the other criminals. You have his defense lawyer, but there's no jury. And someone said, we as the audience are the jury.
Yeah.
We are there to decide his punishment and his guilt and his innocence, which, I mean, I don't know if that's what Lang intended. If he did, that's brilliant.
It's very well done. Yeah.
But I mean, with the death of the author, we can just claim whatever we want is the intention.
Exactly
so,
right.
I love that. I love that we kind of get to make up our minds on what he deserves.
Absolutely. I want to quickly touch on as well, because when you're talking about that, when we're talking about the motives of why people want to hunt him down, there's obviously a lot of fear as well for the people in Berlin, in this part of Berlin. And I loved the scene initially when Elsie has been kidnapped. She's feared dead. No one really knows where she is. And Lang shows us the reactions of people and the accusations that start getting thrown around just by the public. And I love the way he uses the camera in those scenes too. We see all these men in a bar, smoking cigars, drinking whiskey, and then all of a sudden it's just like, well, but I did once see you talking to a little girl and it didn't look right. And they start, and the way Lang puts the camera in front of them and the accusations are getting shouted down the barrel of the camera. And he does that a couple of times throughout the film. And it really makes you felt like as an audience member watching the movie, I really felt like I didn't know how to react to that. And I think he does that really well in the sense of when you start hearing or trying to understand people's motives and reasons for wanting to, as we were discussing, it's not necessarily the purest of intentions to want to find Beckett. He gives you that moral conundrum as an audience member as well. So it's very much an immersive piece of media, this film is.
I mean, even to the point where he's got like witnesses saying different coloured hats or whatever it was.
Yeah, it's like, we saw the girl, she was wearing a red hat. No, she was wearing a green hat.
Yeah.
And it's just that whole confusion and the reality of how easily that sort of stuff.
Just really the foundation of it being fear. Ultimately. It's
that's
just
right.
not knowing. So
I think as well, like it again speaks to the situation that was unfolding in Germany at the time. You think about, once the Nazis did come to power and it was, like the persecution of Jewish people, there was probably a lot of accusations being thrown around of, my neighbor's a Jew, or, this person's, spying on other people. And like there was that kind of like, moral fear in the community. So I think it is a very layered film. This isn't just a film about a serial killer. There is so much social and political commentary in here. And I think it's very progressive.
Yes.
Especially for the era.
Yeah. Totally.
I think a film arguing against the death penalty in 1930, which is a discussion we're still having to this day,
Yeah.
90 years later.
Absolutely.
You know, there are still states in the US that have capital punishment.
Yeah. Well, and also I was going to say before when you were talking about that, the theme just of mental illness as well.
Yeah.
Like we're still discussing that as well. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and I guess it relates to that. Like, can you kill someone if they're mentally ill and
If they haven't, if they genuinely have no control over these things, they claim they have no control over.
But can they be fixed? Can they be
Yeah,
made better?
exactly.
That's
Yeah.
right.
It asks a lot of big questions.
Huge questions.
Yeah.
But packages it in this very intense psychological thriller. Like it's not a film where, as the movie's going on, you're kind of being like bombarded by these questions. It's very much a retrospective thing because once the movie wraps up and you kind of go, well, we actually don't know what Beckett's fate was. That's the thing. It's left very open. So that to me is when those questions start coming in. He's like, oh, would I? Do I think he deserves jail? Do I think he deserves death? And it's funny how then you start looking back at the moments in the film. Because when I was watching it, I was entranced. I was like, this is a great. I'm excited to find out what happens next. It's a great movie. It's well made. It's well acted. But then, it's just a testament to Lang himself, who, as we were saying, especially in movies like Metropolis or just his whole filmography, always had this grander perspective outside of just being genre movies. I can't necessarily, and that's just more what I know about his work, having not seen a lot of it. So I can't really compare what M is like to his other works outside of scale, I guess. But I do find German cinema is very unabashed in the way it wants to project its messages. And I think that's, whether that started with Lang and that's sort of gone into other German filmmakers, if we look at movies that have come out of Germany, like we can even look at something like Downfall, arguably the most famous German film of all time about the days leading up to Hitler's suicide, right? It's still a movie that in an impossible way humanizes the most evil man on the planet. But it still makes you as the audience go, but it's up to you how you want to humanize them. And we're just going to give you the information. We're going to ask you the questions and you run with that. So I think it's a very much a staple of what German cinema was 90 years ago and still is. I know Downfall was almost 20 years ago now, so mid 2000s, but we're looking at other German films since then. They're very, very grounded, introspective films that ask such huge questions. And that's where I've always sort of associated German cinema with, I guess.
I think, as you said, it presents you with the facts.
Yes.
It goes, here is the information. It is up to you to decide how you feel about it. Exactly. And I think you could watch M and you could go, yeah, but he deserves to die. Like, there's no excuse for murdering children. Or you could go, like, it doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't bring them back. What can we do to help a person who is, at the end of the day, sick mentally? Going back to favorite scenes.
Yes.
One thing I absolutely loved, and this is still impressive when it's done in modern films, let alone, again, done 90 years ago, but the intercutting of dialogue. So you've got the meeting between the police and the government talking about how they're going to catch him, while the crooks are also having their own meeting talking about how they're going to catch him.
Yeah.
And it will cut between the two meetings and they're basically finishing each other's sentences.
And
it's brilliant.
It's fantastic.
Modern films do that and it's still really impressive. Yeah. So to do that in that era is just astonishing. Like you almost feel like you're watching the same meeting unfold just with these different people.
Yeah.
And that was the scene. I was like, okay, this is that's really well done.
Really, really well done. It's did you have anything to add about the German style of filmmaking or?
Oh, I mean, I just feel like, especially watching that and with the war, like you just it's such a big moment in human history.
Totally, yeah.
It's just hard not to think about that.
Yep.
And to watch something like this that's pre that, and just on the cusp of it, it's just a really interesting feeling. To, have that.
So it brings up an interesting question, I guess, in my mind. Of we're talking about how the socio-political impact of this film and how that's led to political messaging or just societal messaging in film in general and how it's influenced that. We've talked about the technicalities of the movie being astonishing as well, but as a movie itself, we've spoken about how it's gone from good to great, how there's really astonishing moments. I personally think the movie's a bit too long. I think there are scenes that drag on a little bit too long. There's scenes where I get the point, and then we stay around another 5 or so minutes. And because there are a lot of long takes, because there is a lot of information that is getting delivered to the audience, maybe that's more so the outcome of, firstly, watching a lot of movies, but having modern cinema be able to sort of fine trim the edges a little bit and understand that, you know, we can also do show not tell, where this movie does a lot of tell, which is fine. It's completely fine. I still think it's fantastic.
You see that in a lot of scenes, even when there's like a poster or a letter or something like that on the screen.
Yes.
It will stay on that poster or letter for 30 seconds
So you've read the
so that
whole
you
thing.
can read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Whereas modern films would find they'd have a character reading it to another character.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's a little bit more of an engaging, dynamic,
Yeah.
kinetic way to show that same
Yeah.
information. So it is very expository.
Yes.
And I totally agree. I think there's a couple of different versions that have come out of it over the
Yeah,
last
I
90
read that.
years,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, with footage that's been found and lost and things like that. You probably saw the same version that I did on the DVD, which was, I think, the remastered version from like 2000.
Yeah, I had that one too. It was about like 106 minutes long or something like that.
110, I think.
Yeah, okay, yeah, might
But
have been shorter.
I think
actually,
this could be a 90-minute film.
Yeah.
totally. And the only reason I bring that up is because the 1951 remake is 88 minutes long.
Oh, right.
Right.
So I was that's what I was thinking to myself, is that more so an outcome of modern film watching and how we are kind of more driven towards watching stories that are told to us more succinctly? Or is that just my impatience of being like, having already seen it, but being like, okay, I'm not trying to sound smarter than the movie, but like, okay, I get where we're saying with this. We can go on to the next bit now. I'm just wondering if you guys would.
I mean, I wonder if a lot of that comes from the silent era. Like you would have to stay on a poster so that someone could read all that.
Yeah.
Because there's obviously no one talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's this weird transitional period, I guess, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was talking about with how the 30s is a weird decade for movies.
yeah.
Like, as I said before, sound had only been around for 4 years.
Yep.
You know, like you think about most other technology, like the CGI when it was 4 years old.
Right, yeah.
And how bad that was.
Yeah.
You know?
Rotoscoped lightning in the air.
So, like, that's the thing. I think if you watch M, you almost have to then sort of go and watch a couple of other films, maybe from a few years before
Right.
and a few years after.
Yeah.
Because it will actually give you a really good idea of how much technology changed in that short time.
In that time, right.
Like I said, I watched Wings, and that's a 1927 film, and that feels a lot older.
Right, yeah.
You know, not just
and then
the
it's only
absence
4
of
years
sound.
later. Yeah.
So I imagine if you went and watched something from 1935, and then
Right.
maybe, you know, right at the end of the 30s,
Yeah.
it would change a lot. And then you get to the early 40s. I think Casablanca is 1942. The Great Dictator, I think, is 1940.
Yeah. Crazy, isn't it? Hey.
It jumps so much.
Yeah.
Great Dictator, weird film to watch, given that it was made during World War II, and it's a comedy about
Hitler himself.
yeah.
Oh
Just
god.
a little segue there. It's weird film to watch.
We're in the country for it. So that's okay.
Yeah.
So no, I just found that interesting. Is that I was watching it and there was just some scenes where I felt it was just a bit long, and that to me probably somewhat diminished what my final score, like, I took away from what my final score is going to be, just because, again, I think I can see how this is the blueprint for the psychological thriller, but it's also a fantastic movie.
Yeah. I think it's also, for anyone into movies and film, it's
It's essential, right?
essential just to see that.
I think that's the best word for it.
Yeah.
I think essential. What my cop-out argument with a lot of older films is that I appreciate it more than I enjoy it.
Yes.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I've been
Yeah,
watching
yeah.
a lot of, you know, the classics
Yep.
over the last couple of years. And there are a lot of those films where I go, I liked it. I don't know if I loved it.
Right.
I can understand the importance of it. And I'll probably give it a high score because of that. But I don't know if I'd be in any rush to watch it again. I went and saw 2001: A Space Odyssey at the cinema.
Yes.
First time I'd ever seen it. Great film.
Wow.
Don't know if I'd ever watch it again.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah. Did you watch it on a film print, by the way? Was it a
I think it was digital. But it still looked good.
It's still fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing film to see on the big screen.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely loved it. And I can
And
see
you're
how
riveted for
important it is.
2.5 hours. You're riveted by that movie
With like
in the
40 minutes of dialogue.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went and watched Lawrence of Arabia in cinema as
Yeah,
well.
almost 4 hours
Almost
long.
4 hour film.
Sore bum after that one. Yeah.
Just Alec Guinness and Peter O'Toole in Desert. Is it Peter O'Toole? I
It
don't
is.
know.
Yeah, it is Peter O'Toole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, don't know if I'd be in any rush to sit down and watch 4 hours of Lawrence of Arabia again.
Yeah.
but super important.
Yeah. You appreciate the impact it's had on cinema.
Yeah. And I think it's more often that I feel that way than I do I genuinely love a film. Like Casablanca, I think, is timeless. It's amazing how modern that film feels. And I find Citizen Kane the same. I was completely engrossed in that. M, though, I think I appreciate it. It's significant. It's essential, as Josh said. I don't know if I'd watch it again in any sort of hurry.
Do you think content has a bit to do with that as well? Because I'm a big fan of psychological thrillers. Like I would argue it's probably one of my favorite like genre or subgenre of film. But also, having watched a lot of movies and just being a fucked up kid that I am, I've now seen enough psychological thrillers where almost like the impact of not saying I want to see this, but not seeing a child get murdered in M kind of loses its impact when you do see movies where you see, I think it's 7. You never see the crimes committed in 7, but you see the aftermath and it's gruesome and it's brutal and it's violent and it gives you this sense of how disgusting these crimes are. Or you look at I think of Mindhunter as well, which is a brilliant show. Like, and please make a third season. Please Netflix.
Netflix, if you're listening.
Netflix, I know you're watching right now. And also, if you want to pick up a podcast series for your platform, we know you like throwing money away. I've seen some of the stuff that's on you. I've seen some of the stuff that's on your platform lately.
If you think you've wasted money before, wait till you've spent money on us.
We'll take it. We'll take the cash. But more so in the sense that like something like Mindhunter is the same deal. It is a lot more graphic without showing a lot comparatively to a 1931 film. So I'm the same. I think this is a brilliant film. I think it's absolutely it's intense. The atmosphere is very brooding. Its socio-political message is so layered and very engaging, and it has me thinking about the movie afterwards. But 90 years later, I've seen enough that has replicated it so well and added onto that with, doubling down on the disturbing nature of these things that I am more likely to go back and watch a 7 or even something, it's not to do with child murder, but The Hunt. Where I really found a lot of comparison with this film in. Yeah. It to me, that is, something I would go back and watch over this. But something we didn't really talk about, and it's sort of a good segue because I'm thinking about how good Mads Mikkelsen's in The Hunt. Peter Lorre is fantastic in this movie. Is there anyone outside of him that you would be like is the best character or a favorite character in the film?
There's not really another main character, really.
No, like you're saying, there's an antagonist, but no protagonists in the film.
I mean, I halfway through, I just turned to Susie and said, he is unbelievable in this film.
Amazing in this movie.
He is really good. And he's the way, I think you were saying before, that Chaplin-esque use of his facial features and eyes and the way he moves his body and
the physicality of that. It's almost like comedic, right? It's the bumbling idiot, but he's a bumbling idiot because he is, sorry, not saying that mentally people are bumbling idiots, but I just thought I should say that just to cover myself there. But in the sense of it is someone who is so troubled who doesn't know how to use their body in moments of panic and moments of anxiety, who also just happens to be able to use his body as a menacing force. When we look at the shadow shot at the beginning, the way he steps into the frame, but then the way he tilts his body forward to sort of tower over this girl, you can imagine, even though we're just seeing his shadow, you can imagine what that body language is like and how intimidating it would be to a child. And that's, I think, a lot of Peter Lorre's performance. There are other great performances throughout. I think a lot of the dialogue that is between, especially, I like what Kieran was saying was one of his favorite, after Kangaroo Court, one of your favorite scenes in regards to the intercutting of dialogue. Those performances are great.
Oh, yeah.
But it's Peter Lorre who steals the show, who is actually not on screen that much until the end of the film, until Kangaroo Court. So,
which is funny why you make the 7 comparison, because I think
right,
Peter Lorre's Hans Beckett, a lot of similarities there between him and that character, and then obviously Kevin Spacey's John Doe in 7, who we don't see until 2/3 of the way through the film. And probably steals the show.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
I'm not being rude on my phone. I was looking up the cast of the film.
These kids these days
can't stay off the social media. I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, but Gustav Gründgens, who plays the safecracker.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
I really liked his performance. Really interesting little tidbit about him that's just on the Wikipedia page and that I was reading about earlier is that he established a very successful career for himself under Nazi rule as an actor, and ended up becoming the director of the National Dramatic Theatre.
Oh, wow.
In Nazi Germany.
Wow.
Was basically
He's like the Daniel Bruhl and Glorious Bastards of the Nazi Party sort of thing. Yeah, right.
But it's really interesting, like reading about him, because he was a sort of not openly homosexual man, but everyone kind of knew it.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And that wasn't, very looked upon very favorably in Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
But got away with it because he was such a beloved actor.
I was going to say because of his, impact.
And Adolf Hitler was a big fan of films.
Yes.
I think there was, I can't remember which American actor it was, but I'm pretty sure that he was trying to pay someone to like kidnap him and bring him to Germany so that he could meet him.
Yeah, crazy man.
But yeah, it's just really interesting that he went on to have a really, really successful career.
He is a scene stealer though. Like that kangaroo court scene really is ultimately a verbal battle between him and Beckett in that scene as well. So yeah. And to hold yourself against someone like Peter Law, who is stealing the show up until that point. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Peter Law fled Germany not long afterwards.
No, it was very, very, very soon after, and he made a career for himself by starring in a Hitchcock film, The Man Who Knew Too Much.
1934. Well done.
So,
and then I think Fritz Lang emigrated from Germany not long after as well.
Yes,
pre-World War II,
and still had. I mean, he was making films up until
he made like 40 or 50 odd films.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it was.
I was just reading this morning how Renandi was for being a complete asshole though once.
Oh God, yeah, no. I mean, hey, look, when you
Peter Law wouldn't work with him again after that.
Yeah, right.
He had an opportunity a little while later, and he was like, "Nah, not working for you."
Yeah, right. Yeah,
because he was like getting thrown down steps like a dozen times.
Jeez.
Well, it makes sense why he was an influence for Hitchcock and Kubrick then.
Yes.
Similarities.
You want to traumatize your actresses? And I got the director for you.
The on and off camera lives of our auteur directors.
It goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
I think we spoke about this in an earlier episode. Find me a director of that caliber.
Yes.
Who isn't either a little bit weird or a bit of a dick.
Yeah, exactly.
Like if something comes out that Finch is hard to work with, I think that's going to break my heart. He seems like one of the few.
Well, because he's one of the nice guys who's also like, oh, we're also going to do 90 takes of this right now. And complete tangent. Have you heard the story about Gone Girl where Ben Affleck asked the camera operator to change the aperture by 0.5 on the however it works. I don't know much about lighting, but it's changed enough. And then Fincher came in and went, who the fuck touched the like here's that. So when you get auteurs like that, it's kind of like I guess.
I have heard the anecdotes about Fincher trying to get Ben Affleck to wear a cap of a different baseball team though, and he refused to do it.
I think he wouldn't wear he wanted him to wear a New York Yankees cap, but he was a Boston Red Sox fan. So
I think they settled on like the Mets or something like that.
Like I'm not wearing a fucking Yankees cap. Oh, Ben Affleck. Is there anything else you guys wanted to talk about, or is there any other points you had in regards to M or the foundations ultimately of not just German filmmaking but psychological thriller filmmaking? Or
no, I don't think for me.
I think for people who are into films and into film history, as Josh said, it is essential. If we're only going to take away one word from this podcast, essential, I think wraps it up really nicely.
Totally.
I think for general audiences, you might not get too much out of it.
Yep.
No, it could be like you said, a bit long, a bit.
Yeah, it's dated.
I'm not. Yeah, of course.
And I don't think people are like, oh, you're calling one of the greatest films of all time boring. Like, what an idiot! It's like, screw you. Like, it's it's a 90-year-old German film. Like,
don't worry, I call modern films boring.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're all boring.
If it doesn't have at least 8 explosions in the first 10 minutes, Nick's not interested.
If it's 80 minutes and directed by Michael Bay, it's a 10 out of 10 movie for me. Okay, guys.
I've already seen Nick's end of year list. It's just Fast X.
It's just that's it. No, it makes up all 10 spots. Fritz Lang's Fast and Furious, please. That's what I wish I really would have seen.
But I think you kind of know whether or not it's going to be a film that you want to watch.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I think, as I said, if you consider yourself a bit of a film person, definitely watch it because you're going to get a lot out of it. And if you do decide to watch it and you've not watched a lot of older films, pick something from 1925 to 1930. Pick something in sort of the late 30s and the early 40s, and just watch how much it changes.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, if you watch something like Wings, then M, then maybe like The Maltese Falcon, which I think is late 30s, and then Citizen Kane. Like, just watch the way that it changes.
Just that progression of filmmaking,
And I think it changed so quickly and so dramatically. Like, you would not notice the difference if you did that same, 20 years?
Yeah, that's
15?
right.
Yeah.
You go back, you watch a film from now, and then you go back in intervals and watch a film from like 2005.
Yeah.
You're not going to see a whole lot of difference. You'll see like CGI and stuff like that change because the technology gets better. But outside of that, the performances stay the same. We act the same way. Camera movements and editing stays the same. Directing stays the same. So that was the biggest turning point in film.
Yeah.
You know, like you can argue color, but I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter that much.
No.
Sound is the biggest innovation that we have had in film in its entire history. So I think to have such a masterful use of it when it's in its infancy is really impressive.
Bloody great way to wrap up the episode. I was like, couldn't have said it better myself.
One thing we haven't done that we started doing last episode is your elevator pitch.
Oh, God.
It's your-
You just did it for me. I think
that's
in
right,
regards to that, I was like,
Damn it.
You have
tick
actually
that one off the list. Thank you, sir. I'll be back with my
Kieran
elevator
can just
pitch in
do-
3 movies' time.
I'm just going to go scrub back through the audio and just repeat that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, ChatGPT, can you please
Provide me an elevator pitch.
Yeah. Well, to wrap it up then, our scores for the film. So being my film, I guess after the fantastic elevator pitch, I'll bounce off that and be, because I was, I think, same deal. It's revolutionary. It still manages to be as tense as any other modern psychological thriller that like a genre that I enjoy. I did feel its pacing. I do think some scenes are elongated, but it's Peter Lorre's performance. It is the use of silence over sound that I really found really well done, and it's Fritz Lang's ability to captivate you with his camera movements and then also his messaging. So I went 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
Joshy boy, what do you reckon?
That's yeah. I think once it finished, I was like I said before, I always find these ones really hard.
Yes.
But I was probably leaning a bit less. So I just was
Right.
like, oh, I'm not sure, but it sort of sat with me.
Yeah.
And definitely for a 4-star for me. I mean, I know I can see how people can give this 5.
Oh,
and,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
a masterpiece. And but yeah, for me, for an initial viewing, 4 stars. Yeah.
Kieran.
I don't know. It's like I said, it's so hard. And like Josh said, it's ranking and scoring these films is
It's not easy.
It almost, almost shouldn't do it.
no, it's
Yeah.
it's a bit of a pointless exercise. I
It
think.
is. It is. But it's what the people want.
It's what no one listens to the first 50 minutes of this. They just skip to the end.
Skip. What do they give it?
Look, I'm going to go 4.
Yep.
I've been tossing up between 4 and a 4.5.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
But I think if I was to give it a 4.5, it would purely be based off of the influential nature of it.
Totally.
And I don't think I can give a film a 4.5 just because it's influential.
Yeah. It brings up the debate of technicality, like the technical aspects of the film and your love of cinema and feeling and whatnot.
And everyone rates films differently.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I fully admit I'm a very subjective rater of films.
Yeah.
It's 90% just whether I enjoyed it and maybe about 10% on
I'm
whether it's
the
well
same.
made.
I'm very much based on feeling. Yeah.
And I think my gut feeling is a 4.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to convince myself that it should be higher, and that's not a good enough reason for it to be a higher score.
Totally, yeah.
So it's a 4 for me, but if I was purely basing it on how impressive it is and how important it is, it's a 5-star film.
Yeah.
If I was basing it purely on enjoyment, it's maybe a 7 or 3.5.
Yep.
So I think a 4 feels
Down the middle.
Yeah.
feels right.
There we go.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Which is still a very positive review. So, but like I said, it's essential viewing. I highly recommend checking this movie out because it is just what it does in 1931 with its subject matter and then with the technology they had then. I think it's just astounding.
Yeah, I think it's a great film in its own right, but then what it's able to do from, as we said, like a commentary perspective, the social and political statements it makes, that's really impressive. Most important part of the podcast.
Yes.
What are we talking about next episode?
Well, it's your episode, I believe, isn't it, Josh?
Back to me.
For your 3rd pick. Lucky duck.
Well,
This is fun. I get real jumpy about this.
Again, it's always the hardest. This is the hardest thing in my life at the moment. To pick a film.
I wish I had your line.
Sorry. Yeah, I know a lot of people are probably going to say that right now. No, I find it really difficult though.
Josh is just like lying in bed awake
Yeah,
at night.
for a month.
Ceiling.
Actually, 3 months. For 3 months, I'm like, oh my god, what is it going to be next? No, so when we left last time, you were like, someone's got to pick a bit more of a lighthearted.
Yep.
So I took that on board. We're going to. We haven't been to France, have we? We watched French
not
Canadian, but
Not been to actual France.
Not been to France. Okay. So, it's a dark comedy,
Okay.
but it's a comedy.
Yeah, it's still comedy in the title. I guess.
I'm going to go with Delicatessen.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I know it's very much to be one of Josh's favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, I probably
Yeah.
But,
I mean, I like a dark comedy, so
yeah.
you know,
Have
it's.
you seen it?
I have not seen it.
Have you not seen
no,
it?
No, because so backstory. We were supposed to when Dendy did a re-release of it, and I got sick the night of the screening, so I was supposed to go with Josh to watch it.
Yeah. And you haven't seen it?
No.
Oh wow. Okay. Cool. Good.
Oh, very
This
excited.
will be a fun
Yeah.
one.
Francis
You
Delicatessen.
both seen Amelie? I'm assuming.
Yes.
Same director?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I
Yeah.
liked Emily.
I love Emily. Yeah.
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 No, and I feel like if it's anything like Emily, it's going to be funny and very weird.
Yeah, and quirky and
Yeah.
weird. And,
Which, yeah.
But
Okay.
this
I'm assuming a bit
this is
darker than
Yeah,
Amelie.
much darker. Yeah. So it's like a post-apocalyptic sort of scene.
Okay. Cool. No, I'm excited for this.
I'm very excited
Yeah.
for this one. Yeah, we have to wait a month to talk about it. I was like, God damn. I was like, okay, I'll watch it now. But that's another episode of that 1 Inch Barrier. So thank you all for watching, listening. What do we do? Subscribe on YouTube. You like on YouTube. Comment on YouTube. Tell us what your favorite German film is. Oh, there we go.
And
I just came up with that one on the spot.
if you're from a country that doesn't speak English as its primary language, send us some suggestions.
Yes,
Oh, that would
absolutely.
actually-
Yeah,
You know, I
we
know-
have to start doing.
I know I've got a pretty big following
Audience
from
picks.
some other countries outside of Australia. So if there's a film that you think we should watch from your country, then
that would
Absolutely.
send it in.
Yeah.
Please do. Yeah.
Can't wait to watch, I don't know, like a Ugandan romantic comedy or something.
I mean, shit, they're out there. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we need help uncovering that 1 Inch Barrier. So, yes, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the places. All of our social links and letterbox links are in the description below. And that's another episode. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time. That
See you
1 Inch
next
Barrier.
time.
Thanks, guys.